FlutterFlow is an amazing tool that lets you build all kinds of apps without writing code, whether these are simple apps or more complex apps. But if you've been using FlutterFlow long enough, you've probably realized that there are certain types of apps, certain types of functionalities that are very, very difficult, if not outright impossible, to build using FlutterFlow as is. And so in today's video, I'm going to be showing you some ways that you can build some truly amazing, powerful, production-ready apps. And you probably didn't realize that you can do this. And so watch this video until the end, and you're going to get some valuable knowledge that you can apply right now to the apps that you're building at this moment, if not future apps that you may be thinking about building later on. Now, before we get started, as always, all the apps and all the resources that I talk about on this channel are going to be available to view and or clone from my Patreon page. And if you're still not a member of our amazing, rapidly growing Patreon community, then you can learn more about it using the link in the description below the video. All right, so here I am inside of FlutterFlow, and I went ahead and I created a proof of concept app to demonstrate some amazing functionality that you can leverage in your apps. So I'm going to go ahead and run this app, and then we're going to jump back in and I'm going to show you exactly how I built these features. Now, the first awesome functionality that I want to show you is something that you probably did not think that you can do with FlutterFlow, and this is a Trello board. Okay, so if you're not familiar with the app Trello, this is an app that allows you to drag and drop different items from different columns. Okay, so here we have a typical to-do list. And so you might have some items in this column representing items that you need to do. And as you're working through the items, right, you can simply drag and drop it to the next column representing the next stage of the process. Okay, so these are the items that I need to do. Let's say create a video, and let's say I'm creating a video right now, right, as it's happening. And so I go ahead and I drop this here, and after I'm done, I can drop it, I can drag and drop it to done, which means that I'm finished with this task. And I can keep doing it with the other items, right? And sooner or later, I'm gonna have all the items in this last column. Now, this type of flow is very, very popular. There are lots and lots of apps that use this kind of flow. You have Trello, you have Notion, you have many other tools that have this functionality, and now you can have this functionality in your apps as well. Now, there's a couple of things that you need to know before we jump into FlutterFlow and I show you how I build this thing. First of all, everything here is completely customizable. Okay, so you can customize the columns, you can customize the items. In fact, these items are stored in app state. Okay, so this is tightly integrated with our FlutterFlow app. Another thing that you need to realize is that as we're dropping these items, you see, we're getting a feedback. We're getting feedback in the form of a snack bar. Okay, so our app knows what's happening. Okay, this is a custom widget, obviously, but it's tightly integrated with our app that you might as well consider it like a stock component. Okay, so as I'm dropping these items in different columns, we're getting this feedback here. And this means that you can update your app accordingly, right? As you drag and drop these items, you can, change the type, you can change where the item is, right? You can maybe have an action that writes to the database a new status, right? Which is something that you need to do as the user is kind of, dragging and dropping these items. Okay. And obviously everything that you see is completely customizable. You can customize the columns, you can customize everything, okay? And I see lots and lots of uses for this. And in fact, the way that I see it is, how can you, build a serious app, maybe a project management app or any kind of app that has to do with productivity maybe, without, having this flow, right? This is a must-have. All right, so now let's jump into FlutterFlow and let me show you exactly how you can implement this amazing functionality in your app as well. Okay, so here we are back in FlutterFlow, and as you can see, this is our Trello board here. And this is obviously a custom widget, okay, because FlutterFlow does not have this functionality built in, right? So we need to use a custom widget. Now, the custom widget that I'm using in this case is called App Flowy Board. Okay, this is the package that you can find on pub.dev, which is a repository for lots of Flutter custom widgets that you can use in your apps. And this is a great component that you can use in your apps, okay? So how exactly do you use this component in your apps? How do you integrate it? Well, it's also very easy, okay? So if we jump back here, we're gonna see this my board here, okay? This is a custom widget, and I'm basically following an example, okay? So I just went here, and if you click here, they have an example that you can use. So basically, I went ahead and I copied this example, and I went back here, and there's a couple of things that you need to realize in this example. The first part is here, okay? This is this part here, and this is where we are setting up a callback, okay? This is where we have something called an App Flowy Board controller, and the purpose of this controller is to tell us what's happening. It's essentially to tell us what the user is doing. And so we have three callbacks here. We have onMove group item, and onMove group item to another group. Basically, whether the user is moving an item within the group, within the column, or they're moving it between columns, we are going to get notified. Or even if we move the group, we're going to get notified. You can also move the groups, right? You can rearrange the groups. You can move the items within the group, or you can move the items to another group, okay, within different groups. And so all of this is thanks to this controller, which essentially it tells us what's happening. And the way that I have this connection done from this widget to our app is using a method that I talked about in one of the previous videos. But essentially, you add this parameter called an action parameter, okay? So you can create another one here. And if you select an action here, you're essentially creating a callback, okay? Meaning that you have access to a function that if you call it here, you can see the output in your app, okay? So I already have this callback. I'm gonna remove it. And now if I go back, to my UI and I select this widget here and I scroll down, I have this callback that essentially becomes like an action flow, right? So if I open this up, all I'm doing right now is showing a snack bar, right? But essentially you can do anything that you want here, meaning that if the user moves an item from one place to another, you can maybe save it into a Supabase database, right? Change the status of the item, or you can show a dialog message. You can do anything that you want. The most important thing to realize here is this is a callback interface, right? So the fact that we've created this callback and now we have this familiar action flows, right? Which is an amazing functionality. And this was made available just like a week ago, or like a couple of weeks ago. I mean, we had this functionality before, but they now have the option to pass in multiple arguments, which made it a lot more useful, okay? And what this means is that if we come back here, we have an argument. We have one argument called string, but you can have multiple arguments, right? You can have two arguments, meaning like from column to column, or a couple of other arguments. You can set it up any way that you want. Right now, I just have a string, which is a log message, right? Basically, I'm saying move item from this to this. It's just a log message. But obviously, you can have as many arguments as you want. So this is this controller here. Another thing that I want to show you is that we are passing the initial items here, the to-do items, from the app state, right? So I have this app state here, and I have to-do items. And this is a list of strings, and I have these initialized with these items here. Finish app, create a video, record the video, right? So we have just a simple list of strings. And maybe in your app, you're going to have maybe a list of types, right? Something more complex, meaning that you might have, a type that has a string and has a couple of other things. And then you can have a list of those types in your app, or you can just do what I do, just a list of strings if you want. And so now if we come back over here, what we have here is we accept these to-do items, right? This custom widget gets them as a parameter, right? And we have it here, right? This to-do items is a parameter. And if we scroll down, what we are doing here is we are populating the initial list, right? So we have three groups, right? Representing the three columns. We have the to-do group, we have the in-progress group, and we have the done group. And the only thing that we're doing is we're populating the initial group, right? Because when we start the app, you're seeing all these items here. You're not seeing any of the items here or any of the items there. And this is very helpful to you, right? Very useful, because it's going to be very rare that, in a production app, you're going to start it off and you're only going to see the items here. Typically, it's going to be something like this. It's going to be all over the place, right? Like if you take a look at my Notion that I use to plan all kinds of things, it's all over the place. I have like maybe 6 columns, and I have items, some items in this column, some items in this column, etc., etc. And this is useful to you, right? This is good to know because here is where you're going to be populating it, right? So in this case, I'm only populating group 1 using these to-do items, which is this thing here, which is our app state that we pass in when we load the app here, right? And so in your production app, you might have a couple of items here, a couple of items here, a couple of items there. This is all going to be dynamic, right? And this is all supported with this amazing component. And you can also customize how the columns look, right? So we have this AppFlowy group header that customizes the look and feel of the column names, right? So if we come back to the app again, and let me zoom in a little bit, you can see that we have the name of the column, but we also have an icon, right? We have this kind of this thinking item, right? This thinking icon, essentially this light bulb, right? And if we go back to the app, you see we have this icons, a light bulb circle, right? And this is this header where you can specify the icon, you can specify the title, you can specify everything. Everything is customizable, which means that you can have this functionality built in. You don't need to code it. You don't need to do anything. And so if you're building any kind of a productivity app or any kind of app where it's helpful for the user, instead of manually changing the status to drag and drop the items to different columns, then this is the component that you want to be using. And I really, really like this component. And as you can guess, I'm going to be using this component a lot in the future complex apps that I'm going to be building. So you're going to be seeing more and more of this component in some of the future apps as well. Now, the next functionality that I want to show you is a grid component that essentially enables you to create all kinds of data-driven apps. So things like spreadsheets or any kind of apps where you need to display data. Now, I know FlutterFlow has a data table component that does something similar, but this component is the king of all grid components. Once you see this component, you're going to be using it in all of your apps, okay? So this is the app right here, and what we have here is we have 4 columns of different types, and we have some sample data. So we have a text column, we have an integer column, we have a data column, and we have a select option column. Now, this data here is populated when the app loads, okay? So I have this data randomly set to display when this component loads, when this app loads. Now, once you have your data loaded, there's so many amazing things that you can do. So first of all, you have these filters here, right? You have these filters that are built in essentially in your grid. Okay, so for instance, let's say I only want to see items that have Nebraska in them. Okay, so I can just type Neb, and as you can see, as I start typing the word Nebraska, this thing is the only one that's left. I can delete it, and now I'm seeing things that have the letters NE in them, right? So we have NE, we have NE, we have NE, or I can type something like port, and I'm going to see all the things, all the strings with the word port in them, right? So this is instantaneous, right? This type of filtering. Another thing that I can do is I can filter on the numbers as well. And obviously this filter is going to be different, right? As you can see, it says greater than. So if I type 30, that's all the items. But if I type, something like this, that's none of the items, right? Because there's no item. There are no items that are greater than this, right? So I can do that. I can do this. And as you can see, it's filtering it, right? So now these are the items greater than 300,000. These are the items greater than 30,000, etc., etc. Now I can also type in my filter, and I can click here, and I can change this filter, right? So I can come in here, and I can say less than. Okay, so I can do less than here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be seeing less than 300,000, less than 3 million, and now I'm seeing all of them. And now obviously the filter is working in a different way. Same thing with the dates here, right? So I can click over here and I can clear this filter here, and I can come back here to this date. We have less than, okay, so I can put something like 1993 or 101, and I'm seeing items that are before this date, essentially less than. And I can click here and I can make it greater than, right? I can click here and I can say greater than, okay? And now I'm seeing the items greater than, okay? And so now I'm seeing the 2000s, right? I can clear this as well. and it's all gone. And here we have the options, right? So this is contains, and I can say contains E. I can click here and I can change this, filter here as well. I can say equals to, I can change all of these things. And so what's happening here is we give our grid, we tell it what kind of data that we're dealing with, strings, integers, dates, and it creates the filters automatically. And then we say we want to see a filter, and it understands, okay, this is an integer, so we have kind of the integer arithmetic. And then based on the types, it understands what kind of filter it needs to create, right? So with string, it contains, with integers is greater than, less than, dates, similarly. And then we have the select options here, and this is contains. Now, this is not all, right? Obviously, you have this cool filter editor here. So if I type lake, I can click here and I can create more filters automatically, right? So I can pick a column here and I can say, well, I want to create a multiple filter, right? I want city and state contains lake, and I want population to be something else, less than whatever, right? So I can have a more complex filter with more complex conditions. Then I can come back here and I can delete it here, right? So now we've cleared all the filters. And that's not all, right? I can also sort it by a specific column, okay? So all I need to do is click on the column and it's sorting it. You see, this thing changes in kind of ascending format, right? So this is sorted A to Z. If I click again, now it's Z to A, right? So now it's Z to A, and I can click again, and it resets the sorting on this column. And the same thing here, I can sort it from, ascending, in ascending order. I can sort it in descending order. Lots and lots of interesting things on all the fields, however I want. I can also resize the columns. Okay, I can make this column like this, make this column like this. And if I click here, I have more options. I can do auto fit. I can do hide columns. I can do set columns. I can set a filter. I can freeze to start, freeze to end. So I can, for instance, click here and I can do freeze to start. And now this thing is frozen. So as I'm scrolling through this, right, if I had more columns, this thing will always be visible. And I can click on this again and I can do unfreeze. And now it's unfrozen. Now, another really cool thing that I want to show you is that all of these fields are editable, right? They're editable in line. You can edit these fields right in the cell. So check this out. If I zoom out so that we can see the entire screen, let's say I edit this and I say I want to change Nebraska to Florida here. When I do that, I get a notification, value change from Lake Nebraska to Lake Florida. You see that now? If I change this back to Nebraska, you're going to get a notification again. Okay, Florida to Nebraska. Now, this is powerful because obviously this is a custom widget. So this is not something that comes with FlutterFlow out of the box. This is not a built-in component, but it's tightly integrated with our hosted FlutterFlow app, because if you do anything here, if I change any of the fields, we get a notification. And what this means is that our app, our hosted FlutterFlow app, knows exactly what's happening here. And this is powerful because the app knows that the user has changed something, the user, changed the setting, changed the value, created the filter, etc., etc. You need the app to know all of this, right? Because, it's not enough for you to be able to change it in the UI. You want those changes to be reflected in the database, maybe in some of the other pages, maybe as a notification to somebody. Essentially, you want to make sure that anything that the user does via the UI, the app knows about in the backend. This is exactly what's happening. And so let's say if I change this by selecting another option here, well, it knows about it. Value change from C to E, right? And everything that I've shown you so far is merely scratching the top of the surface, because there's so many things that you can do with this grid component that after you start using it, you will never want to use another grid component ever again. And also, once you start using this component, you suddenly will have the motivation and the inspiration to create all kinds of amazing data-driven apps that you probably didn't think was possible before, obviously, because you didn't know this component existed. Okay, so now let's jump into FlutterFlow and let me show you exactly how I installed and configured this component. First, this component is called Pluto Grid, and you can find it on pub.dev. And this is the best, data grid component that I found so far. It does a lot of things and it does them really, really well. And so now let's jump back into FlutterFlow, and I can show you how I have this set up. So as was the case previously, I have another page here, and this is the component here, and I'm using this grid widget here that I've set up as a custom widget. This is this custom widget here, and I'm just using an example. They have tons of examples available on pop.dev that showcase various functionality, various features. And I think the example that I chose here showcases the filtering functionality, because I wanted to see how filtering works, because that is a very, very useful piece of functionality. And as you saw, it works really, really well. Now, let me show you the things that you're going to find valuable. Okay, so here we are setting up our columns. Okay, so this is the part where we're setting up our columns, and this is the part we are setting up our rows. Okay, so as you can see, I have 4 columns, and this is the title for each column, and I'm saying the field. I'm specifying the field, and I'm also specifying the type, right? So, obviously this data grid component supports all kinds of different fields, things like text, number, date, time, true or false, etc., etc. Here we have an option, and here we're giving it a list of options. Okay, so we don't want like a free form, like a text input. We only want the user to select from any of these options. And this is exactly what happens. So if I double click here, you see I have this choice that's popped up, which is different when I double click here, when I can simply edit this and change it to whatever I want, right? So this is another type, right? This select is another type, and like I said, it supports many different data types, many types of fields that you can use in your app. So rest assured, this component has got you covered. You'll be able to create any kind of an app with it. So once we have these columns configured, if you scroll down, you can see now I have the rows. Okay, so our rows are set up the exact same way as the columns. Okay, so with the columns, we have the text, we have the number, we have the date and select. And then when you're creating the rows, you need to specify the values for each of the columns, and which is exactly what's happening here. So we have text, number, date, and select. So in this case, this is this city, this is this number, the date, etc., etc. And I have how many records I have? I have like 5 records, I believe, right? So if we go back here, yeah, I have 5 records. Okay, and you can create as many as you want. It supports pagination. It supports a ton of things, right? This is just an awesome component. And I only want to show you the best. And remember, when you join our Patreon, you're going to get access to this app, so you don't need to worry about how to set up everything from scratch. You're going to get access to the exact app that I'm seeing here. You'll be able to clone it. And so you'll be able to change the date and kind of experiment right away, right? You won't need to check the documentation and everything like that. You're going to get access to this app directly. Now, once you have the initial data set up, which is pretty straightforward, the next thing that I want to bring to your attention is our event managers. And here we have various callbacks. So unloaded, when something happens, is unloaded, unchanged. And this is the callback that we're using, right? Because we want our hosted FlutterFlow app, we may be building a complex app, so we want the app to know the rest of the, the pages, anything that's happening in the app. We want the app to know anything that's happening with the components. So as the user is doing some things in the UI, we want those events to pop up and come back to us. So we have this unchanged event that lets us know when the user is updating the values. And we also know the new value and the old value. And so we're printing this to the logging console, but most importantly, we're using this unchanged callback, which is this thing here. It's the same thing. This is an action type, right? You see, this is this action type, the same scenario that I talked about in the previous example. And this is something you're going to be doing all the time whenever you're going to be using custom widgets and in many other situations. So this is something you need to get used to. And so we have this unchanged callback that lets us know. In this case, it just passes a string that tells us, okay, value changed from old value to new value. But if you're going to be building a production app, you probably want at least 2 arguments, right? New value and old value. And you can simply come over here and you can add more action parameters here. And now if you go to the UI and we select this widget here, scroll down, we have this unchanged callback, open it up. And just like, with the previous example, we are just doing a snag bar. And that way we are sure that the callback, the notifications are being bubbled up correctly back to us. Okay, and obviously in your production app, you're not going to be doing this, right? You're not going to be showing a user a snack bar anytime the values change. You're going to be doing something. You're going to be updating data in the backend or validating data or doing something else. You're not going to be, showing a snack bar. The snack bar is just for testing only. Okay. So an awesome component. I can't believe I found it. I really did not think such components existed, but this is a special component. This is a lot better. At least it's a lot more powerful than, the other components that I, discovered early on. So if you ever doubted that you can build a spreadsheet type app with FlutterFlow, well, now you know that you can, and you can do a lot more with it. So definitely check this out. It's called PlutoGrid. PlutoGrid, check it out and start using it. An awesome component. And as you can guess, this is a component that I'm going to be using in my future apps that I'm going to be building, complex apps, simple apps. I have lots and lots of app ideas, and I can't wait to start using this component. Now, this next component that I want to show you is a component that you're going to be using in all kinds of apps because people need to input data. And this component is an editor component. Okay, so here I have an app running. This is the same app, except I have this app running on my browser here. Okay, and so this is our editor. And so if I click here, it's telling me insert something or type this to insert a block or start typing. And so I can start typing, right? I can start typing. I can type anything that I want. And if I press here, I can see all the text that I've typed. Now, this is important because that way you know that we have full control of this custom widget. Your app knows exactly what's happening. But this is not all, right? There's so many things that you can do. So if I enter this / here, I have an option. I can do text. I can do H1, header 1. I can do header 2, header 3. So let's say I pick header 1, and now I can type it like this, in this format. Hey, a title of this note. Okay, press enter, and now I can type regular stuff. And now if I press print editor state, I have all my text here, and obviously I can keep going. I can press this here, and I can do a checkbox. Okay, so now this is a checkbox. Checkbox 1, checkbox 2, check. Look at that. How cool is this? And I can keep going. I can press this / and I can select something else. So for instance, I can do a bulleted list. All right, so now we have a list, with the bullets. Okay, this is item 1, item 2. Okay, and now we have a bulleted list. Okay, I can delete all that and I can do something else. So maybe a checkbox. Okay, so this is item 1, item 2, and I can check these. And look what happens when I check them. Okay, look at that. I can uncheck them. I can check them. I can also select them, right? This is completely selectable. I can right click and I can do copy, right? I can come back here and I can do Control V, allow, and I can paste. Okay, this is a very powerful editor here, editor component. So I can do this again. Let's say I want a numbered list, item, etc., right? I can delete all this. I can remove all that, etc. I can insert a table. Okay, now I have a table inside, and I can, add before. I can, add more rows, more columns. I can, enter stuff in there. I can type, I can, do all kinds of things, and I can delete it as well, right? And I can clear content, I can remove it, right? And I can remove this right here, and now the table is done, okay? And obviously I have lots of more things. I can insert an image, I can do a quote, I can do a number list, I can do all kinds of interesting things. And I have full control. I know exactly what's happening, because it's one thing to have a component, but remember, this is a custom widget. It kind of lives in its own world, right? It's very important to know what's happening, to have your app know what's happening, which is exactly what we see here, because I can just type print editor state, and I see all the text here just displayed as just plain text, okay? And now let me show you what this component is, as well as how you can leverage it in your apps. All right, so here we are back in our app. This is the component here. And the component that I'm using is called App Flowy Editor, and it's brought to you by the same people that build the board, right? So remember that Kanban board that I showed you in the first example. Well, it's the same people build this component as well. They build a couple of components, and these components are amazing. And that is why I wanted to show you these components, okay? So now let's jump back into FlutterFlow here. And as you can see, I'm using a custom widget. It's called Awesome Editor. And this is the implementation. And it's very, very easy to implement. You can simply head over to pop.dev, search for that component. They're going to give you a bunch of examples. Very, very simple. And I just have a very, very simple demonstration. This is probably the easiest, the simplest custom widget out of all the custom widgets that I showed you today. So all we're doing is we are displaying this flowy editor. I'm using this editor state, and this editor state is blank, right? You can initialize, your app. You can initialize this editor state with, text and different things. So if you're loading from a database, you're loading from app state, you can initialize it. But here I'm initializing it as blank with nothing, right? And that's all we have. And we also have a button. The user presses a button and we just output the text. So I have a couple of helper functions that take the stuff in the editor and just display the plain text. Because remember, one interesting thing here is that in this component, there's lots of different things that you can insert, right? So these are, special types of special types of text, special ways of representing text. And what I'm doing in my code here is I'm basically looking at all the things and I'm just extracting the text. Okay, so if your app is going to be a little bit more complex, you want to get the actual image, you may need to modify this custom widget to get the actual image. And thankfully, you can use ChatGPT to help you, display, save the text any way that you want, because you have all of that information available, right? So meaning that if I enter an image, if I do an image or I do a quote, all of that is available, right? This component knows about all of this. And so you can make all of this, all of this input text available throughout your app. And I actually haven't found a similar component to this one. I found some, text editing components here and there, but this is the most complete, one of the most powerful components when it comes to, inputting text, creating lists, inputting an image, uploading an image, creating tables even that I found for FlutterFlow, for Flutter. And so if you are building an app, something like Notion or a text taking app, you may want to use this type of a component, because you don't want to just create like a box, just a standard FlutterFlow input box. You want something that's a little bit more sophisticated, right? Something that allows users to do maybe H2 here, heading 2. This is a heading 2, and then they can enter regular text. You want something a little bit more sophisticated, something that allows them to enter like richer text, something like this. And this component is going to fit the bill perfectly, right? It's going to be perfect for that use case. And it's also very, very easy to integrate it with your app. The only thing that you need to know is it's kind of tricky to test this component in FlutterFlow, right? There's some conflicts here and there. And so as a result, I ended up downloading this code and building it here for the browser. And as you can see, I have this entire app. Remember, we have this other page, we have this first page, we have the spreadsheet here. And as you can see, this component works perfectly once you build this app for a device, right? So right now I'm testing this app on my browser here for the web. But regardless, if you are building an app for the web, you're building an app for the mobile platforms, Android, iOS, this component is going to work. It's just I had some issues testing it using FlutterFlow's tester, but because we're building apps so that users can run them on their own devices, you're not going to have issues with this component. So definitely take a look. It's called App Flow Editor. It's available on pop.dev. And just like with the previous components that I showed you today, this is a very, very powerful component. This is not, like just a regular kind of input box where a user can enter text or maybe do something such as select. You have various settings. You can do a header 1, header 2, header 3. You can do images, quotes, divider. This is a very, very powerful component. And when taken together, these components allow you to take your app building skills to new heights, because they allow you to build truly amazing apps. So you can build like a Kanban Trello board. You can build like a spreadsheet. You can essentially build your own Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel or what have you. And you can also build a very, very powerful editor. So whether you're building it as part of a more complex app or just as a standalone app, you can deliver a lot of value to your end user. And so I hope you've gotten value here. And really the best way to get started with these components, right, after you finish watching the videos, is to start to experiment with them, right? Start testing them out by themselves, testing them out, as part of a more complex app, is to start kind of playing with it. That is the best way that I learned to become more proficient when it comes to building Flutter and FlutterFlow apps. And obviously the best way to do that is to be able to clone this app, is to be able to get everything that I'm seeing in front of me, get essentially everything that you see here. And you can do just that when you join our amazing Patreon community. And when you join our amazing Patreon community, you're going to get access to this app, but you're also going to get access to all the apps that I've published on this channel. And I've built all kinds of apps in all kinds of niches, in all kinds of varying difficulty levels, right? From simple apps to, intermediate, a little bit more complex, to much more complex apps, to, production ready, complex apps, all kinds of apps, and you're going to get access to all of that. But that's not all. When you join our amazing Patreon community, you're also going to get access to extra content. So things like Q&A, behind the scenes, our Patreon supported masterclass series where I do deep dives of various tools, various app builders, various concepts, anything that the community wants to know more about. And so the community votes on what they want to learn more about, and I go out and I do a master class, which is a long video. It's kind of a deep dive video that talks about certain things, concepts, app builders, tool builders, and I also answer questions from the community as well. But above and beyond all that, when you join our amazing Patreon community, you're going to be supporting this channel and supporting my work, and that is greatly, greatly appreciated, because at the end of the day, you guys are the reason that I'm here. You guys motivate me to create more and more amazing content that hopefully brings you more and more value and helps you build the apps that you want to build. And so if you've gotten any value from any of the videos that I've created over the years, then you definitely are going to get even more value inside of our amazing Patreon community. And so if that sounds like something you may be interested in, then definitely check it out and consider becoming a member. And you can do just that via the link below this video.